I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 8th, 2015 City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. If you'll all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Try.
Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis. Here. Rich Obertino.
Here.
Terry Knowles.
Here.
John Nummer is here. Sherry Bilderbeck.
Here.
Michael Daming.
Here.
Dan Glowski.
Here.
Jennifer Hansen.
Here.
David Dimmitt.
Here.
David Plefka.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nuremberger. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the March 11th meeting. Any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, they'll stand as submitted. No items under old business. First item under new business is a petition for site plan approval for a building addition at 2555 Hermelin Drive. Petitioner being Burns and McDonald. Is the petitioner present? Yes. Would you please step forward, sir, to the microphone, introduce yourself, and go ahead and present your application.
Yes, I'm David Crum with Burns and McDonald, architect and project manager for this particular project. And the project is for the building that Meridian Medical Technologies is leasing, and we're adding a modular building to the back side of that existing building. The modular building is going to house locker rooms, restrooms, and a break room. And those are currently inside the building. They're being relocated out to this to free up some space for, in the future, they're going to add some more technical space inside the building. So what we're here for today is basically for the modular building that we're going to install.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crum, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Wise, staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is a 1.85 acre tract of land located in the industrial park. Kind of sits south of Litzinger by a set of buildings, so it sits back behind a lot of the buildings that you see off of Litzinger. The property is zoned LID, Light Industrial District. It's an existing use on the site, but they're looking to add a modular expansion. One of the most prominent features that you'll notice in looking at the elevations is that it has a steel support structure that elevates the building up. That is due to the location of the creek immediately to the west of the building and to be in compliance with the city's floodplain regulations. They have previously submitted a floodplain study to the city of Brentwood and MSD, and that floodplain study has been approved by both agencies. In addition to the modular buildings, the support structure does also hold some mechanical equipment on top of it. I do have some information on the noise levels that was submitted by the applicant that I can pass out to you, assuming that you can explain kind of what this means to everyone.
Generally, yeah.
The other primary item with this is parking in the area. There's kind of tight parking in that general vicinity of the industrial park. The application notes that there are currently, they would be removing 25 parking spaces to fit the addition, and that would result in 226 spaces being available for the site. Now, the site itself does not have that many parking spaces. I believe, so the 69 spaces that are noted in the staff report, that actually needs to take the 25 out. So that would be that there are 44 parking spaces on the site, plus the additional off-site parking that the applicant notes on their application.
So, in fact, Mr. Wise, right in your report shows 69 parking spaces on the site. In fact, it's 44 parking spaces on the
Correct.
site.
After the 25 are removed, it's 44.
But there's a shared parking easement,
There is.
I understand?
There is a lease that the applicant, that the tenant has for additional parking off-site.
How many spaces?
Well, it's 226 minus 45, so 180 roughly.
Okay.
The Carver line lot is 93.
There's 93 spaces.
Carver line east lot, yes.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Crum, why don't you characterize the parking use at your site?
The existing parking use is for employees to park there. The leased, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the leased space is to replace that parking. Plus, during construction, they also need space for staging and construction trailer and that. So that's another reason for the additional parking that was,
But current parking use, if you could characterize it on a daily basis.
sorry.
Personal automobiles.
Yeah, go ahead, you got to step forward, we got. I mean, are we using all 69 spots right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And we've added, I'm Kevin Borland, by the way, I'm from
Thank you.
Pfizer. We have leased 93 spots behind 8030 Litzinger, which we also use for our employee parking.
And how many of those are being used?
At present, maybe about 10 on an average day.
Okay. So you're using approximately 79 spots per day on average.
Roughly, yes. We have several properties there, so we can spread our employees through several of the properties that we lease right now in that area.
I see. Thank you. And Mr. Wise, have you seen this lease for the parking lot?
I have not seen it. Under the code, basically, it's required to be submitted at the time of the building permit. Given that it's an existing lease that's in place, they could, of course, give it ahead of time to make that a little bit more clear.
Okay. And Mr. Crum, obviously it's a very distinctive building. I'd like to get Mr. Obertino's thoughts on the building. You've addressed one of the distinctive features being the stilts, and we understand why those are there. Mr. Wise touched on these HVAC units on the roof. Are these screened?
They're not screened. It is on a steel platform, and it's, like I said, elevated above the modular building. There's not room on the roof to put all the equipment up there on the existing building. This equipment serves that existing building, not the modular building. Where this is at is back there, you know, along the creek. It's all tree lined, so you really can't see the residences from that area. So the only people who can really see that is back in that industrial portion of the site. As far as sound goes, that was what Mr. Weiss alluded to. Our mechanical engineer had a study done, and these units only have fans in them, and the noise would be equivalent to a lawnmower at 5 foot away from the unit. So that's about the level of noise that these units will put out.
Okay. Mr. Wise, we're passing out the sound study right now for the record.
Yes.
And who developed this sound study, Mr. Crum?
The sound study was developed by our mechanical engineer, and he got his information from the vendor, the manufacturer of the equipment. As far as interpreting those numbers for you, I'm an architect, so I'm not going to be able to be much help to you there, but I can certainly supplement that information for you if you'd like.
Well, the problem, Mr. Wise, I'm with Mr. Wise. I don't understand what these numbers mean. Do we? Our code speaks to particular decibel levels.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
Do we know whether these numbers comply with the code?
It appears that they would. There's a little bit of difference in where the measurements are taking. This talks about 5 feet from the property line. Our code actually talks about, or 5 feet from the unit. Our code actually measures at the property line instead of at the unit itself. So you would expect these numbers to be slightly lower. But it does appear to be consistent.
No, I believe the numbers are around 80 to 85 decibels, if I remember right, with 5 foot from the unit.
Yeah, I mean, they in that range.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, let's open it up to the commission. Mr. Nurnberger?
I was going to say, do they run all the time, or is this just HVAC that they run during the summer or that sort
It's
of-
like your air conditioner, it runs when they're needed, so they would
Right.
run more heavily in the wintertime, in the
So
summertime.
do you run 24-hour shifts, or you have just during the daytime, you have people there? How's that?
The facility is 24 hours, 24/7, so it would
Okay,
be,
so it could be running during the night as well, you know,
Yes.
that sort of thing. 'Cause we're really concerned about any residents behind your elevating up and having the sound go to the residents, that
Right.
sort of thing. So I just want to make that point. I thought maybe it would be on and off, not a constant. If there's a constant mowing or whatever noise, it could be really annoying, but that's all.
I think
it
it's
is.
going to be run more in the summertime, and in the summertime, there's that nice tree buffer where the creek is there, which is going to help with that sound buffer as well.
Ms. Knowles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to piggyback on John's comments. This is, sound-wise, this is a very sensitive area. You'll remember dogs barking. You may or may not remember the mysterious noise that we've investigated and can't determine where it comes from. The buffer of the trees going directly west isn't the concern, it's going up. It's
Okay.
all of the residences above there, and it pinpoints right directly up there. I'm just a little concerned that without true verification that this is going to meet our sound code, that I'm just concerned for those residents, of which I am not one. I'm just concerned for them.
Sure.
I share your concern. Other commissioners, Mr. Glasky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it necessary to put the units on the roof?
The problem is that there's really not space to put them on the roof of the existing building because they're so large, and there's limited space on the site to locate them. Because of the size of the units and everything, and with being in a floodplain and everything, it seemed to make sense to get them elevated. And putting them above this made better use of the limited site that we had to work with.
And then I'm curious, what is the purpose of the platform that has the units that seems to be over the modular building?
It's simply to support those units and to provide access for service. So,
Because it seems like the platform above the modular units is almost double the height of the units. Is that necessary?
oh, I see what you're referring to. Yes, because what's not shown on this model is the ductwork. And there's ductwork that runs from these units across the top of that corridor length into the existing building. And we need that height there to get the ductwork across between the platform and the top of the modular building.
This seems very unusual. Is it because of the nature of the operations inside of the modular units? I think you said they were restrooms and,
Yeah, it's nothing, it's really just support space for the building. It's restrooms, locker rooms. Some of the core areas in the building, the staff are required to be dressed out in booties and smocks and that's where they dress out for that in there.
and it seems like the units on top of the platform are very large. Is there something else up there besides?
No, it's just those units. And they are large just because of the amount of air and that they have to push through. And because of the sensitive nature of what they're doing inside the building, all this air is filtered with layers of HEPA filters, which requires, because they're so fine, it requires more air to force through. So it makes the units bigger, the ductwork bigger.
All right, and then final question. It looks like there's a stairway that goes up to the top of the platform.
Yes, and that stairway the bottom of that is a stairway to access the second entrance into the modular building. And then it goes above that, and that's how maintenance accesses these units to service them. And we've provided it doesn't show in this rendering, but we've actually provided a locked gate with a chain link fence around that to keep people from getting up there that aren't supposed to be up there.
Are there any other access controls up the stairway to the roof?
No, that's the only way up there, is those stairs. So we'll keep that locked with a locked gate. It's like a chain link gate that goes around.
around the structure, but not.
Right,
not
around,
the stairs.
well, around the stair structure, correct.
Yeah, I would just be concerned, it's unusual to see a full-size staircase going up to the roof of a building for safety and other reasons. Thank you.
Mr. Demmett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These units up on the top, are they compressors, condensing units? I'm sorry, you just mentioned that they were the fans only.
That generate noise, correct. There's just big fans in them.
Okay,
And they're for they're air handling units for forcing air into the building.
Okay, it's a condensing unit, or there's a number of condensing units up there for the air conditioning?
Yes.
Okay. And you have no way of being able to compare for us the difference in sound between these units and what we have at our homes to give us some idea of sound?
It would be comparable. These would be a little bit noisier because they're bigger. But I wish I had those numbers in front of me. But I mean, I would say your residential air conditioner might be something like 70 decibels, and we're talking about like 85 decibels.
Okay.
So it's going to be a little bit more. My mechanical engineer compared it to a lawnmower, the sound.
Right, that's what I was going to point out. Down here at the bottom of your study, it says, for reference purposes, 90 decibels is roughly the sound power of a lawnmower or kitchen blender, and 60 decibels is equivalent to a hairdryer. Can you tell me on your study, are we focusing in over on the right-hand column or under chiller? Is that what it says here, chiller?
That's another piece of equipment. That's actually, the chiller's not actually up there.
Okay.
There's a chiller, it's actually behind the building.
Do you know which of these columns represents the units that are going to go up there?
Thank you.
All five?
It would be AHUs 1 through 5. The chiller is actually,
Okay.
and Sherry, I'm correct, aren't I? The chiller, I'm real familiar with. The
Well, I don't know if you can tell me to stand up here if I talk. I'm Sherry Cookbud. Sherry, how are you? And I'm with Burns McDonald. There's a chiller that sits behind the existing building. There's 3 chillers already there, and then we're adding a chiller behind that building.
Okay.
And I want to go back to your question, Daniel, because I think there's some confusion. The air handling units on top of the modular building, they're feeding the existing building, not the modular building that's the new lunchroom and locker room.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, so the left-hand column where it's 63 hertz, 125 hertz, you see that?
Right.
What does that represent? Do you know?
That has to do with the electrical feed to it, I believe. Again, I'm getting way out of my specialty
Okay.
here, so
All right.
my
Just hoping to get
apologies.
some- On the issue of the parking, so if I understand correctly, you'd be down to 44 on-site with this addition, and you have then approximately 180 some off-site?
And they're about a block away.
Okay, that was going to be my question. When we
Yeah.
say off-site, how far are we?
It's about a block. And it's, Pfizer Meridian has a R&D building it's behind that building. Where that's at. Like Kevin said, they have several properties in the area.
And in between that block and your lot, are there other parking spots for other companies, other businesses back there?
There are other lots, but yeah, they're dedicated to those particular companies.
Okay.
It's kind of a jumble there. Some of the lots are kind of, it's not easy to tell who owns what lots.
Right.
Yeah,
No, I was back there today. I got a little lost.
yeah.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Plufka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question about the scale of these things. There's 5 of them, and you compared them somewhat to a residential unit, they look 4 and 5 and 6 times bigger than the residential unit that I have in my house.
Yes,
anyway.
they are bigger.
And so how many fans are in each one of the 5 units?
I believe there's one in each one.
What's the dimensions of that single fan?
I couldn't tell you off, I don't have that information.
And
with
so
me.
you also indicated that what's not depicted in these pictures are the ductwork that I'm assuming would drop down below and fill that space that's currently open,
That's correct.
and then would communicate into the existing building from this platform.
Yes.
And how will the ductwork make its way from what's being proposed to being built to the wall of the existing building?
The ductwork, it drops down between, in that space there, and it runs along the top of the connecting corridor between the two buildings.
The-
So they'll-
Top of the connecting what?
There's a, if you look at that top picture, you see this piece right here, that's actually an enclosed corridor that connects the
Okay.
modular building to the existing building.
And they'll run on top of that.
That's correct.
Will this ductwork be insulated?
Yes.
And
And then when it gets over the existing building, it'll actually penetrate the wall right at that point and go inside the existing building.
at some point near where that staircase is in the existing building on the lower photograph of the two?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be on this side. When you're looking at the picture there, it'll be on this side of that stairwell. Or stair.
That's one of the questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Albertino?
Is this walkway enclosed?
Yes.
So it's heated, cooled, roof on it?
Yes.
The whole deal? How many employees are in this building?
Kevin?
What are these numbers, parking stalls flying around, but how many people are in here?
100.
That building, across 3 shifts during the day, that building will have approximately 50 to 55 employees. On second shift, approximately 30, and third shift, approximately 12.
So at some point, you have a maximum parking demand of just short of 90 cars,
Roughly.
when one shift shows and before the other shift leaves.
There's approximately 200 employees that throughout the course of a 24-hour day are in that building or our adjacent buildings.
Okay. The sound's obviously going to be a big thing, and just because I'm an architect doesn't mean I understand what these things mean either. But it looks like, it talks about the chiller's not even part of these numbers, and one of them is talking about a jackhammer at 50 feet away. So if a jackhammer's out in that hallway, that's pretty loud noise. I think we need to look at some kind of screening, noise, some kind of solution at the top of this thing. And then I also want to see drawings showing what this ductwork is going to look like. It needs to be somewhat enclosed on top of it, because I don't see what this walkway looks like.
Right.
I don't think it's depicted on the drawings, and I think we need to get some detail of what that is. And a true representation of what this ductwork's going to do. I'm assuming that ductwork's going to go across this walkway. It's going to go on the roof of the existing building and drop through the roof into this building. But
No, it actually runs into the side of the building.
what's happened in this building to require this many tons of extra cooling all of a sudden? I mean, we're putting 5 huge air handlers on here. Is it because of a code change, or, I mean, it can't be just because you brought the toilets out of the building and you put
Oh, no.
I mean, you're talking about an extensive amount of cooling that's going on here, and if you weren't putting the toilets outside, then what would you be doing?
No, we're upgrading the facility for CGMP standards, which is
Okay.
for,
And the existing roof structure can't handle this load, is that what?
no. No, and it was, I mean, we did look at doing that, and it's very complicated and expensive to do it because that building is so full of stuff in there, plus the interruption to their operations to do that. The whole purpose of doing this is to try and prevent them from losing any production time out of their facility, so.
Okay. Well, I could just tell you from here with the dogs, my dog goes down there, you're going to have issues if we don't at least have some kind of plan in place that says if and when there is an issue, you know that you're going to go and fix it and not be arguing with the neighbors kind of thing? Because I think that's kind of what, you know, the other applicant had to come back in and put sound walls up and the whole deal, and you may want to plan accordingly in advance of doing that.
Well, so you've heard these issues with sound. I think it's pretty clear. You've given us data here with sound. We need to, I think it's pretty clear we're going to need to retain an expert. Our sound, we do have a sound consultant here to interpret this data and be able to tell us whether or not it is an issue or not. To your credit, you acknowledge you don't know how to interpret this data. We're not sound engineers up here. So, you know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe the commission would be inclined to recommend that this be analyzed by a sound engineer. So with that understanding, are there any further questions, Mr.
I was going to
Nuremberger?
say, what exactly do you have on site that you're using today that makes, it's all added? Or is there, right now, do you have noise that happens at your site right now for your?
Comparable to what we're adding here?
Yeah.
Comparable
Is
to
it-
what the sound of these units
Is it
would
going
be?
to double or is it going to replace some of it, what you're having today?
We're not replacing anything, so this is an addition to what's
So it's
there now.
it's doubling the size of the air movement.
We are replacing the existing, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We are replacing the existing units that are on the building,
Okay.
okay?
So,
When
and
we-
you're adding all these other units?
Right.
So.
But the ones that are on the unit now, on the building now, are going to be removed. They're all
Oh.
going to be removed. We're not doubling,
So they're gonna be gone?
replacing them, yes.
Okay, so,
My apologies for that.
okay, so I'm just trying to understand, you're gonna be just moving some of the existing unit to the site to up above
Okay.
that site?
We're replacing the units that are there now, does not have the capacity that the upgrades require.
Right,
That's being required by, you know, the regulations. So we have to, the existing building will not hold, is not strong enough for
Right.
the bigger units.
right.
So we're gonna place the bigger units, and then, we're not gonna install them right away, so that we're gonna install them, we're not gonna start running them until we get the old units off the building, and then we're gonna run the ductwork over into the roof of the existing building.
I guess the thing is, you're gonna be taking some older units are off that make noise already,
Right.
currently, and you're gonna be replacing them with new units. They might be simultaneously working at one point, but then one area is gonna go away, so.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pulaski?
Yeah, you've mentioned several times the sound of a lawnmower, and I think just so that we all are clear, you're actually talking about 4 lawnmowers and a jackhammer.
There's 5 air handling units we're adding. I don't know how to describe them.
Okay, but I mean, one lawnmower, I can tell in my neighborhood if someone's mowing their lawn.
Yeah.
And 5 of them, or 4 of them plus a jackhammer, I think would be excessive.
And I don't know what our mechanical engineer, did he say that some of them sound like a lawnmower or was?
No,
No,
I think he
my-
says 90 decibels is roughly the sound of a lawnmower, and there's,
Okay.
one of them is at 90, the other ones are slightly below. The other suggestion I would make, and you mentioned you had to put the units on the roof of the structure because of the floodplain concerns. This looks like it's about 25 feet above the floodplain.
It's probably
I would like to have you consider, and I see there are numerous walkways and other areas, to put them above the floodplain, but not so high.
Well-
I don't know if that's an option, but that would certainly help, I would think, with the noise.
Well, back to the reason there's the gap between the top of the modular building and the steel platform is there's ductwork that runs under the units, over the corridor, and then there's ductwork that runs above the units, yet your inflow and your outflow. So you got double layer of ducts going through there. And this ramp that's shown on the drawing there, that no longer exists. We're not gonna put that ramp in, so.
Okay, well, I'm just suggesting, instead of elevating them to such a high level, I don't know, from an engineering standpoint, if it's possible to put them lower, that would certainly help. if that's
Yeah,
an
there's
option.
really no other place to,
For the space.
to put them. And the other problem is the further away you get from the building, the more air resistance you have, and you have to make units bigger to get the air over to the building. So this was to try and keep them as close as we could, to keep the units as small as we could.
I understand, but I would like you to consider that as an alternative.
We'll look at it.
So, a couple items for the record. One, Mr. Glowski, and again, I think we need to have a sound engineer analyze this, but I do see at the bottom of this spreadsheet where they indicate total excluding chiller. So, I don't know what that means. I think we need to get a sound engineer to interpret it. But it would seem to be all 4, 5 of them, but we need to get some clarification on that. And secondly, did I understand that you're going to remove this ADA ramp?
Yes.
So this building is not going to be ADA compliant?
No, actually, there's nobody that can work in the building. You can't work in the building if you're not able-bodied. And so we had talked to the city about not having a facility ADA facility.
Do you believe it is ADA compliant?
The existing building?
Yeah.
No.
Well, if it accommodates your employees according to the law, it would be ADA compliant. You don't believe you need to make these adjustments to make it compliant with the ADA?
I'll answer your question carefully. There's nobody that works in the facility that they have to be able-bodied to be able to do their work in the building, because of the nature of what they do in there.
Okay. No, I understand your position. We probably just need to get some clarification on that from a legal perspective. So with that understanding, is there any other? Yes, Ms. Hanson, sorry.
Thank you. Quick question about the chiller. Is this, so you're placing a new chiller behind the existing building. Is this a replacement chiller or an additional chiller? So are we looking at more than one chiller now?
It's an additional chiller.
How many do you already have?
I want to say there's 3. 1, 2. Say there's 3 chillers back there, is there not, Pat? Yeah, there's 3 chillers.
I can't tell from the plans. I know what behind the existing building means, but I can't tell on these
Right.
plans if they're.
That point.
Yeah, could you please, just for my understanding?
Right here. And then this is just the new chillers.
All right, so the fourth chiller will go in that same pad behind the existing building?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what that pad's there for.
Okay, so in addition to the 5 new HVAC units, we're going from 3 to 4 chillers as well? Okay, all right, thanks.
Ms. Bilderback?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say with a lot of great minds, a solution can be found. I think it's pretty clear that everyone has a lot of sound issues, and every time something like this comes up, I can't help but think about the flyover ramp that MoDOT put in that wakes me up every morning, starting about 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm really sensitive to the idea of sound issues, obviously. I think with a capable engineering firm and sound engineers that will be able to figure it out. And I would just say, from my perspective, just kind of get creative with your thinking cap of what you might do to block the sound, given all of the feedback so far, would be my 2 cents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Deeming. I'm going to leave the sound alone. Sounds like we have that part covered. Is there any, this structure is a little odd, obviously, and it's not a high volume street. Is there any way to put a wrapper around this building, a screen or anything, so when people, it kind of looks like an oil rig or something back here, you know, so,
Where it sits, you really can't see the building.
yeah.
Where it sits, you really cannot see the building from the road, and we do have the creek and the tree cover on the backside,
Right.
so.
Okay.
You're not on an island on that one, Mr. Lewis. I think everybody shares those concerns.
I'm in the Gulf of Mexico right now.
Has there been any complaints of noise currently?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mr. Wise, have there been any sound complaints about this existing building?
With 4 chillers working now?
There have not been any sound complaints about this building.
Would any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Okay, let me summarize what I think the consensus is, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the consensus is that the commission would like to have a sound engineer analyze this data, coordinate with the applicant to ensure that we don't have sound issues emanating from this site such that either our corporate citizens or our residents would be affected. We want to get some clarification on the ductwork, visual clarification, visual representations, as well as on the walkway. Anything else? Okay. All right, then we'll take this to subcommittee. And Mr. Wise, can you coordinate with the applicant as to the sound engineer
Absolutely.
and the other items that we just discussed?
Yes.
The one item, let's go ahead and take this up right now, Commission. We had discussed the subcommittee, and there was a request that we move the subcommittee meeting from April 29th to April 22nd.
I can't do it that night.
You prefer the 29th? Right. Anyone else affected one way or the other? Anybody else positively affected might cancel out Ms. Bilderback? All right, seeing that we don't want to have Sherry there, so let's keep it on the 29th. Is 6 p.m. okay with everybody? Yeah.
Just brings a tear of joy to my
All
eyes.
right. Yeah. All right, so April 29th at 6 p.m., Mr. Crum? Yes. And we'll look forward to hopefully seeing a supplemented application with a sound engineer report. And to the extent we don't have the sound, just like the last month we had a similar issue, to the extent we don't have the sound report by the 29th, we can take this up at a future meeting. Is that agreeable with everybody? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crum. Next item under new business is a petition for conditional use permit for retail use at 8515 Manchester, the petitioner being ABC Wireless. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, sir, introduce yourself, and go ahead and present your application.
Yes, my name is Isa Boedo. I am the owner.
Okay, what do you want us to consider here?
I would like to open ABC Wireless in Brentwood. We are a cell phone repair shop, cell phone sales. We're a T-Mobile, Verizon, Boost Mobile dealer. We do also computer repairs in our stores.
Do you own this building?
No.
Who is the owner?
Gus Batonis Properties.
Mr. Wise, staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The site is a quarter-acre site zoned GC General Commercial District. Under the General Commercial District regulations, retail sales are a conditional use, hence the applicant being here this evening. The building itself is comprised of 3 tenant spaces. On the western end of the building, there's an existing smoke shop. On the eastern end, there's Wild Nails, and the applicant's proposing to move into the center space, which has been vacant for several years. The existing building is, for all 3 uses, is 3,582 square feet. It does meet the parking requirements with the proposed use being added in, as well as the existing tenants being added into the calculation as well. There are no other site improvements that are proposed as part of the application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wise. We'll open it up to questions from commission members. Mr. Nuremberger?
I did drive to the site tonight, and unfortunately, there's not anybody from ownership or whatever, but it could use some sprucing up on the parking lot as far as some of the parking places, just some attention to detail or whatever, not necessarily going to the applicant or whatever. We don't want to have him go through any, jump through any hoops or whatever, but I think there should be some ownership improving a site. You also said you don't have any signage, but what I saw when I went there, you have a bunch of signing in the window and saying you're coming and that sort of thing. So what are you going to plan to have? You going to have something on the pole sign? Are you going to have something in the space or whatever that says they're gonna have one outside like the nail shop has and that sort of thing. So what's her plan?
Yes, that's it. I've actually called to apply, when I applied for the permit, and I was hoping it's actually going to go through, and then I found out that I had to go through this. And I did ask about applying for a permit for a sign, like the one that next door have, the Wild Nails. It's going to be up there, and we're also going to see if we can put one on the pole, like the one that both of my neighbors got. But the ones on the window, they're going to be all removed, because we actually started, then we had to stop, so all of that's going to be removed.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
but you're gonna be like open and close or something like that, maybe some signage that says what you are, but
Absolutely.
not the whole window.
No, we need you actually to see inside.
Right.
So we're not going to block the view, no.
And Justin, I guess that can go through at another time to do the signage, or how's that?
Well, they have, it depends on the route that they want to go. The existing pole sign's a legal non-conforming pole sign.
That's
So-
what I was saying, I would not like to have something else put on the sign.
So to expand that would require them to basically come through a comprehensive sign plan, which would have to come back through this process.
What about if he wants to do something like the nail shop? Can he do a sign like that?
Like the wall sign?
Yeah, above
Yeah,
his
yeah,
shop.
he can do that.
And that
It's
will
laid
be
out,
covered under
and
code.
that's an administrative review and approval.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Mr. Nuremberg, I thought your point was well taken. I went to this site and I could barely make out the parking stripes on the parking lot. So I'd like to see that restriped. I'd like to see that parking lot restriped or addressed to a large extent. Are you willing to do that?
I mean, yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, so you're willing to commit
Absolutely.
restriping the parking lot?
That's not an issue.
All right, very good. Other commissioners?
I do.
Ms. Hanson?
Thank you. How many employees will you have?
Just me and another person, basically. So two.
What percentage of your shop is sales versus repairs?
Well, it's going to be sales more, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now we do have a location open, and we do more sales than repairs.
Where's that location?
That's in Cahokia, in Illinois. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Okay, commissioners, we can either kick this out to subcommittee, or we could take it up. The petitioner has agreed to restripe the entire parking lot, and we're not talking about just right in front of your store, we're talking about the whole parking
got
lot.
it.
I appreciate that gesture. Anything else? Thoughts, Ms. Bilderback?
I'd be willing to make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
I recommend that we recommend approval of this application with the condition of restriping the entire parking lot.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Rich Overtino,
Yes.
Terry Knows,
Yes.
John Nuremberg, yes. Sherry Bilderback,
Yes?
Diane Glowski,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen.
Yes.
David Dimmitt,
Yes.
David Plufka.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much for your cooperation. We look forward to having you in the city.
Thank you.
Okay, please work with Mr. Wise as to your next step.
Absolutely. Thank
Can I
you.
get a quick clarification on who seconded that? Oh. I'll touch base with you tomorrow.
Okay, final item under new business is a petition to amend certain sections relating to distant requirements for group homes within our code. Mr. Wise, can you present this issue?
In our current code, there is, group homes are permitted uses in the A, the B, the AR, and the multifamily residential districts. And as a requirement within there, there's a distance separation that group homes can't be located within 2,500 feet of one another. The recommendation this evening is to modify each of those districts to change that distance requirement to 500 feet. And this basically stems, there was some recent litigation for another city in the St. Louis area not too long ago that had a similar requirement. The HUD filed a lawsuit against them. They did end up settling the lawsuit. They had monetary damages, as well as part of the concession was reducing the requirement to 500 feet. So the proposal, to be consistent with the HUD action that was taken, is to go ahead and revise our separation requirement to be consistent with that settlement.
And this is a matter of public record. It was the city of St. Peters that was sued by HUD over this issue, and they had to pay a sizable sum, with HUD contending that $2,500 feet was arbitrary, capricious, and frankly discriminated against persons that wanted to inhabit these group homes. I know there's many cities within St. Louis County that are looking at this as well.
Right, and I mean, I guess just to follow up, I've heard, while we haven't received anything, I have heard of some other cities within the metropolitan area that have received inquiries from HUD, kind of reaching out to them about their regulations on this matter.
Mr. Dimmitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justin, what's the, how did this get to us? Was this in recommendation of the city attorney, or is it somebody else?
It came through Public Works committees where it stemmed from. So it was brought up, so when the new code was adopted, prior to the new code, I call it the new code adopted in, I believe it was November of last year, there wasn't a distance requirement separation. And as the city had gone through that recodification effort, the standard was put in place, and then that took a while to get approved. And then in the meantime, there was this St. Peter's settlement that came out. So it was brought up by someone on the Public Works Committee. We had a quick discussion there, and they referred that matter to P&Z.
So was this I guess what I'm wondering is this on behalf of a recommendation of an attorney who said we need to do this?
It is not. This is
Okay.
a proactive, trying to avoid having to go through that.
Well, here's my concern. I pulled up the consent decree that was the subject of that litigation. And in the consent decree, it doesn't say anything about 500 feet. What it says is that they shall modify their ordinances in accordance with and basically as long as the federal government is happy with them, and the federal government cannot arbitrarily withhold consent of that. And it looked like they eventually, somewhere along the line, they came up with 500 feet. My concern is, without an attorney telling us this is what we should be doing, I'm not sure that we're really improving anything. We're going from 2,500 feet to 500 feet. If 2,500 feet is arbitrary and runs the risk of violating the Fair Housing Act, I don't know why 500 feet also wouldn't possibly violate the Fair Housing Act. Again, without there being an order in place saying that 500 is permissible. You see what I'm saying? And that's my concern here is, at the end of the day, I'm not sure we're going to be any better off if we go from 2,500 to 500. And I'm just wondering, do we just eliminate the 500 feet altogether?
I was going to say, if you want to avoid the potential for a discrimination suit, removal of the requirement altogether would certainly be the most defensible.
That would be my recommendation, is that we eliminate the 500 feet to begin with. And that way, because if our concern is, like in that case, they paid $80,000 in attorney's fees, they had to hire a compliance officer, I think it was. They had a number of training classes that had to be attended. If we want to avoid all that, the surefire way to do that is to eliminate the 2,500 feet altogether. Any type of restriction in terms of where they can be placed next to each other. Or are we better off having this sent to the city attorney for his or her review to advise us on that? I'm hesitant to reduce it just to 500 feet. I'd like to get an opinion on that.
And I think that's right. I know we have lawyers on this commission. Some lawyers are actually very familiar with this issue, but I don't think it's the place of we lawyers to be discussing that. I will tell you that there are distance requirements and distance limitations that have been approved by HUD to prevent, to allow dispersal of these homes throughout the community as long as there's reasonable accommodation policies that are in effect. But again, I think your point is well taken, And to the extent there's any questions on that, I think we should get some outside legal analysis on that. Ms. Hanson?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Dimmitt, and I'm also curious if we're going to send this to legal counsel, what other concessions were included in the consent decree that we may bump up against, in addition to a distance requirement? And I know you said that, I think for purposes of their settlement, a compliance officer, something. I don't know if there's anything else that would be germane to us. So if we're going to take a look at it in terms of a distance requirement, we might as well get in front of anything else that could potentially come up. And I think that would be helpful for an attorney to look at those issues too. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this? Seeing none, Mr. Wise, can you forward this to legal counsel?
Will do.
Okay. Okay, and we can discuss that at the subcommittee meeting as well. Next item is aldermanic report. I see no current aldermen in the room. City planners report, Mr. Wise.
No report. Well, did you want to handle the other, we have another matter.
Let's do it in other
Okay.
business.
No report. Well, I guess I would want to update the commission on the 290 Hanley Industrial Court project. It was at the Board of Aldermen this past Monday. There was a lot of discussion on it as well. They did hold it at that meeting, so it will be back before the Board of Aldermen on April 20th.
What was the basis for the hold?
Well, the current tenant in the building showed up and had raised a couple of concerns. I'm based off of the conversations I've had with them as well as the property manager. I think that those will all be able to be addressed without any harm to either party. So.
Questions for Mr. Wise? Okay, volunteers for the April 29th, 6 p.m. subcommittee meeting. I hope so, Ms. Bilderback. Thank you. All right, rationale, Mr. Wise, can you handle?
Tough crowd.
Other business, we have the comp plan on the agenda. We can take this up in subcommittee, but this is on the record here, so I'd like to have a discussion now. We had a presentation at our last meeting. We appreciate several of you made it to the March 30th meeting. And my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the consensus of the commission was that a new plan was probably not necessary at this point. I think that was supported by the consultant. Rather, I think we were looking at some sort of update with, and I thought there were several commissioners that were interested in particular targets on various aspects and various areas within our community, including, but not limited to, Hanley Industrial, Manchester Road, and Brentwood Boulevard. So I wanted to poll the commission, have a discussion on that, and make sure we're all on board with that. Where we would go from here, if we could have a discussion on the scope of the plan that we'd like to occur, we'd like to have take place, then Mr. Wise would take that scope and bid it out, just the same way we bid out this audit. And then we'd have to get some funds for that, whatever the scope was from the Board of Aldermen. But could we have a discussion on what the consensus is on the scope? Ms. Bilderback.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I think that was what the discussion pretty much reflected at the meeting, and I still am of the same mindset. I think at the time I said, like, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, like they did back in the old days, right? Anyway, so, with some updates and looking at some key areas, it allows us to delve into some things more fully than we had before. We can still get rid of the conflicts in the existing plan and fix up some of the language so people can actually really understand what it says and have it be utilized as a tool without necessarily throwing it all out. So I think that blended view is perfect, and it would maximize the use of our dollars and give us a much better product than if we completely started from scratch. And my question would be, what level of detail does Mr. Weiss need from us in order to draft this request?
Mr. Wise?
Well, I think some consensus on the sub areas, and then maybe also some consensus on not necessarily the order at this time, but how the commission would want or foresee tackling this issue. And I guess what I mean by that is, if we were to look at the Manchester Road corridor, do we want to look at that corridor and then move to Brentwood Boulevard and then Hanley Industrial? Or, to kind of separate them out and have focus on each of those areas? Or would you rather take off the big bite of the apple and try to, define what each of those sub areas are and then tackle the update to all of those somewhat concurrently? I will be honest, I'm a little hesitant about tackling all of that at one time. I think taking them one at a time from a staff perspective allows us to focus and hopefully get more direct, input from some of those folks around that are directly impacted. So that would be my first one. And then I guess kind of to the point that you were talking about some of the conflicts, we could wrap that into an initial phase of it as well to talk about. I know there was one example given about, I think it was multifamily and how you had to go from this page and then skip 4 pages and go to the next one, that maybe we could tackle some of the organizational issues early on as well.
And I think that makes sense. I wouldn't have a problem splitting it out and going in some particular order. And also, just one other thing that we talked about at the meeting is I definitely don't want to pick off the zoning code or anything else at the same time. Like, I think it's critically important to just do the comprehensive plan first, because we need to do it right, and it's going to take time to get it done right. The other thing that I foresee that I'd like to do is, I know there's things in the plan, because the Planning Commission did not spend very much time on it back then. I was actually on the commission when that plan was done. And I'd like to actually go through the whole thing and make comments. I mean, I don't know if, if it makes sense to have the firm that would be hired to do this clean it up first and then go through and make those kind of comments. I'm not sure which way makes the most sense. I mean, if the language is so archaic, that would be important first, I would be okay with that. But if not, like, if it would make more sense from the standpoint of going through and finding some of those changes and discussing them first, I would be okay with that too. And for some reason, I kind of envision going through the plan, taking a look at, because maybe some of the more recent issues that have come up, but I just kind of see it working from the north, like taking Hanley Industrial Corridor, coming down Brentwood Boulevard and coming to Manchester. We do have the full Manchester study that we can also use as a basis to work on this. So as far as the flow, for some reason, that just feels like it makes sense, but understanding that each of those sections would get done. But I think it's pretty clear from all of the public comment over time that, and the applicants that we've had come into us, and some of the areas that need to kind of be revisited, that, as we talked about, the Hanley corridor, the Brentwood corridor, and the Manchester corridor makes sense, even though in the Brentwood corridor we have less control over some of that because of who controls Brentwood Boulevard.
Mr. Norberger.
A little confusion. I thought we were going to use the same company that we did who did this part of it, because they've done all the background research and was going to be less expensive to use them. I feel like you're going out to bid, somebody else is going to have to recreate all the stuff that they did before moving forward. So I don't think they did anything that would say we can't use them. I don't know what their price is going to be for doing it, but I just think that might be a waste of resources. The other thing is, I think it's really evident that we need to have a better format for presentation, whether it be online and a booklet form or whatever that's readable, not something that's like inch thick or whatever and it's hard to read or whatever, something that you really can find, and also residents can look at it and say, I know what you're talking about, and that sort of thing. It's not like so foreign to them and that sort of thing. So that's all I had.
Mr. Glasky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be concerned with the phased approach because it is a comprehensive plan. And I think the whole objective is to look at the city as a whole and make sure that we have everything balanced, the commercial, the industrial, the residential, the recreational, transportation. I think it's okay to handle it in phases, but I think it would be a mistake to focus on one area without also including the entire city. I just want to make sure that that is what you're talking about and not dealing with it piecemeal, because I think that sort of defeats the purpose of a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I think, I agree with what you're saying.
Well, and just to be clear, so Mr. Glasky, I think, is suggesting that these targets be done at the same time. The consultant develop these targets at the same time, because the consultant may, and I agree with it, the consultant may very well say, hey, I know the commission wants to do these updates in this order, but the consultant may have a completely different opinion and it may be grounded in its practice. So is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not so concerned about the order, but I think it's important to look at the entire community.
I think that's right.
As part of this process, even though we're focusing on one area after another.
Mr. Plufka?
Thank you. To build on what John said just a second, I think the third element to this, not only the sub-area focus, but also the formatting issues that John touched on. But the third thing I think was, in his presentation, was talking about the ways in which the recommendations are displayed. I think he talked specifically about creating computer-generated cityscapes that people could point to and say, this is how we want a section of Manchester Road to look. I think he spoke about the fact that he thought those were a lot more, that people responded to them, that the public responded to them more than reading 10 or 12 pages about the Manchester Corridor or Hamley Industrial Park or Brentwood Boulevard. And so I thought that, to me, that would be like the third element that I would include. Thank you.
Good point. Other questions from commissioners? Okay, so a couple things we need to decide is, one, it sounds like, do we want a general update of this plan to correct some of the deficiencies in the current plan? And to the extent we also want these targets, what are the targets? I suggest Hanley Industrial, Manchester, and Brentwood, but do we want to exclude one of those? Do we want to add something else? And then finally, Mr. Nuremberger brought up a good point. Is this something that we want to bid out, or are there benefits in maintaining the consultant? Mr. Wise?
Our city code actually dictates this process. So the contract that we have with our current consultant was for the review only. So under our city code, we will have to go out for an RFQ under this process. And that was relayed to all of the consultants that we interviewed in the first step. Now, with that said, I think in the interview process, they've done all the initial work, so they certainly have a lot of information that will help them. But we will go through the RFQ process.
And I do think that is the right approach. The problem is as everybody that was there recognizes, they didn't have a lot of good things to say about the people that drafted the old plan. So I hate to have all of the other applicants, other than Halcyon Levine, say that Halcyon Levine didn't really do the right thing in the industry standard in their audit. But that being said, I think that's just something we're going to have to take into account.
Okay.
So that's been addressed. How about these targets? Everybody on board with those targets?
Perfect.
Okay. Mr. Wise, can you maybe put together just a summary of what the consensus is, and we can discuss it at subcommittee?
Yep.
Okay, good deal.
So we add not to add a fourth one, but should we add something that goes to the thing about a community center or a park plan or whatever, updating it and that sort of thing? I don't know. There was a lot of people that were talking about that at all the meetings and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that's a sub area or not, or it would be just part of
I
that.
think you missed that boat on that one.
Yeah,
The park plan just got redone
yeah.
in its entirety, I guess. And I just read we're spending $7-point-some million on the community center. So I'm not sure there's much more that's going to happen on those for a while. It would be nice to have a copy of the park plans when we do what
Right.
we're going to do.
Maybe that's what we
There's a
just need.
coordinated effort amongst
Yeah.
the city because it's kind of, that took place without us being involved.
Yeah, it really did.
Not sure how well that worked out, but
Good point. Well, let's take a look at Mr. Wise's summary, and we can always evaluate that at subcommittee
Right,
and see if
yeah.
we need to supplement it. Sound good to everybody? Okay, we do have one sad note to take up under other business. Ms. Terry Knowles has accepted her resignation, which was declined, by the way. But nonetheless, she vetoed my declining of the resignation. So Terry is going to be resigning effective tonight
Yes.
from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Terry, how long have you been on the commission?
In June, it would have been 14 years. I found out tonight that apparently that's when my pension and insurance would have kicked in, which is why the current mayor accepted my resignation so readily, but
Well, Terry,
14 years of enjoyment.
You've just been an invaluable member of this commission. Every time that you've offered anything, I think it's offered some merit, and it's assisted in this commission's deliberations, and it's for the benefit of the city. So we appreciate all
Thank
your
you. That's
time
very kind.
and all your many years of service, and we did get you a little plaque. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't also extend congratulations to one of our own, David Plufka, having been elected last night to the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you.
It's bittersweet because we'll be missing him on this commission, but it's for the benefit of the city, I believe, as well.
Thank you very much.
Anything else under other business? Mr.
I
Nurnberger?
just, with going by the nail shop or whatever, can you give an update on Russo's improvements to the lawn care equipment company?
I talked with them, it's probably been about a month ago now.
Because they haven't done anything.
Right, and they're, well, through the winter time, they weren't gonna do anything, and now they're planning on starting as soon as basically we get some dry weather.
Okay.
That's the last I heard.
So,
They're
all
still
of it-
moving forward.
Okay,
So,
just curious. Thank you.
Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Stand adjourned.